Hey, Chris, thanks for joining us today. And I know that we've had our first episode, an attempt to try to continue this conversation. And so let's try to evolve this format a little bit. I sent you the message that I would like our topic today to be this, as I see it, a tyrannical overreach of government. Obviously, in the state of Michigan, we're experiencing it significantly more than if you were to live, say, in Florida or in Oklahoma or in South Dakota. And you can say, well, those states have not been hit with a hot spot of this crisis. And so, yeah, they haven't taken this draconian effort. And I just think that this has been a man-made crisis, giving an excuse to be able to overreach with government. And I believe it's illegal and it's unconstitutional. The extreme measures, that's unreasonable, even though our governor has quoted the 1946 legislation that gives her the power to do this. And I think it's because we are not united enough as a citizenry that we have not said, no, that's not going to happen. You cannot keep me from buying a lawn chair at Menards yesterday. That is an unreasonable, and you cannot keep me from buying paint at Menards where they actually have larger aisles. You're going to force me to go to the local hardware store that has smaller aisles and have even more contact. It's not based on fact, it's based on control. And I believe that it's based on a political decision. So I have these beliefs, and I think that you might agree with some of them, and I think you might disagree with some of them. So I sent you the text about the tyrannical overreach of government. And if that's our framework to start our conversation, do you think that I'm way off on any of this?
No. Hi, thanks for having me on with you here today. I love our conversations overall. When we sit here and talk on the phone, we'll get lost in conversation for 45 minutes to an hour talking about different political stances and structures of the government and business and flows and structures of it. But I have to tell you something that, the First Amendment and our rights overall, they're foundationally built upon the federal system. And I think that the state legislature, the governor currently going into play to do what they're doing, I think she's fearful in one of lives being lost and to be blamed, right, for lives being lost. So, here's the thing: we're still protected by the federal government. We can go do whatever we want to do. We can march on Lansing if we wanted to. I understand your frustration. I completely get it. I get the frustration with the limitations on being able to access what you want to be able to access and what stores you want to be able to go to and shop at. Everybody's frustrated with it. I'm not against I understand where the governors come from. I should say that. I understand also where you're coming from. I don't think that I'm torn between whether it's worth letting the house burn down to save the house, if that analogy makes any sense. Right now we are in a dire state to where we can't come back from this overall without some major adjustments, without major impacts on our economy overall. And that's the problem. How do we stop the impacts from being a long-term effect? As far as not being able to shop at Home Depot or being able to go to the stores and whatnot, I get it. I'm frustrated about it too. But the long-term effect of what they're trying to do, the impacts of us on that, on our economy, that's going to be a major issue. And that's my focal point. I think it's all short term as far as being able to stop us from shopping at the stores. We'll be able to shop at the stores soon enough. Those stores are going to be able to, they're not going to allow the government to dictate what they can sell and how they can sell it for long. I can tell you that. And, with the lobbyist firms and the tight-knit firms that are in our government structures, they're going to push back. It's only a matter of time. And they're already pushing back. the automotive industry right now is pushing back in hard ways to be able to start up May 1st. That's their objective right now. So May 1st, stamping plants and automotive manufacturers are trying to, be back online. And if the U.S. or if the Michigan state government comes back and says, hey, you know what? No, you guys can't open up. They're going to push back. And you know what? They're going to say, listen, fine us. Go ahead. Fine us. At the end of the day, we have federal rights and we have, state rights. Now, the governor can try to do anything that she wants to do. She can sit here and say, you guys have to stay in home and you guys can't leave your house. But we have the right to assemble. We have the right to march on Lansing. And we should. And people should stand up for their rights, and people should verbally and physically express their objections. But my issue with this situation is, here's my issue. You're going to have the two eyes. You're going to have idiots and ignorance that are going to sit there and they're going to block hospital entrances that are trying to, to give the state police and the law enforcement officers the right to be able to come in there and actually break up this peaceful movement. But it has to stay peaceful. And one thing you talked about is we're not organized. We're not organized in the aspect of, we're organized at a distance. We're organized on social media. We're organized on Facebook and Instagram and on Zoom calls talking about it. But gone are the days to where people actually sat there and they got their pitchforks out and they got their lanterns out and they marched down the streets, and the numbers actually warranted change.
Well, let me comment on a couple of things that you've mentioned there. So let's talk about the cure being worse than the disease. You talked about, you believe that this is going to last economically longer than the actual crisis, but that our freedoms would be restored. And I would say that that is a continued fallacy that we subscribe to because we are comfortable. We do not have blood in the streets, so to speak, to the extent that we would grab our pitchforks and run and take a non-peaceful approach to trying to fight for our liberties and freedoms. So let's talk about the economic aspect. We do believe, because of what we see, we're both small business owners. We both have a fairly unique, because if we were to describe to some people what a consultant does, or how we consult, or what the status of a broker is, or some of these things are not fully understood by many people that simply go to work for somebody else. Yeah. And it is something that I do want to get to eventually, because one of the topics also, if we have time today, is how it's not. Many people say, well, it hasn't really affected me. The crisis to me is not that we're attempting to try to avoid this crisis by saving lives that are so important. One of the lies I think we hear is every American life lost is a tragedy. And I think that is a bunch of bullshit that is, it's disseminated out there through mainstream media. And it is a convincing thing that we need to save all the lives. The most vulnerable among us is our middle income and low income economic groups, and those that are battling with the opioid addiction, depression, the mental health issues. What we have seen is a spike, and it will not be accounted with this epidemic, but there's actually these people with these large analytic understandings of things. For every 5,000 and every 10,000 people unemployed in the United States, we have increased death by alcohol, suicide, and overdose. This man-made aspect of this supposed crisis is going to kill more people than it's the unintended consequences, so to speak. It's going to kill more people in those categories than the virus would have killed otherwise. When we look at Dr. Fauci talking to us even late February, that we're going to see the numbers very similar to the flu death when it's all said and done. all of the real data, not the talking heads on mainstream media, all of the real data, the true science suggests he was accurate in February. Well, how did all this change in March? And I truly subscribe to the idea that government never lets a crisis go to waste. And so you have this large faction, especially evidence of it here in Michigan, where you have this overreaching, authoritative, tyrannical, and unreasonable show of force. And it's when we talk about how unclear this is, supposedly the governor's office is saying, well, you can buy tomato seeds at the local hardware store. The landscaping companies, I just did this for stores over 50,000 square feet. Again, what science? What science is backing that up? So I have firmly believed for the longest time that when the government asks for 1 millimeter of my liberty, then they take 10 miles of my liberty and freedom in their execution of laws and orders. And I'm going to kick it back to you because my greatest fear is not, this virus that needs to be respected but not feared is going to be more damaging than what we've done to our citizenry and what we've done to the world by shutting everything down. Back to you, Chris.
Oh man, this is a loaded topic. If we go back in time in history, the government's always done that. They've always tried to, they call it fixing, or they assume they're fixing problems, right? Because they hear it, they hear concerns every single day from their citizens. The representatives take calls, the senators take calls, the president takes calls. And so when crises happen, basically it's an open checkbook. The checks and balances, the crisis management aspect just opens up a flood of legislation and pig ears supposedly haven't been around for a long time, but hey, they're still there. These little pet projects of the different representatives. I don't think in a whole that their initiative is to take freedoms away. I don't think that's the way they look at it. I think they look at it as solving a problem. One person's problem takes away another person's freedom. For example, people contacting the state legislation from up north saying, don't let these people with coronavirus from downstate come up to their vacation homes to get away. So the representatives accordingly represent their constituents and say, hey, you know what, Governor Whitmer, we need to put a ban on people going to their vacation homes. And that's exactly what happened.
Okay, right? let me comment on that real quick, because so I own personal property. I have rights with that property, and you're telling me I cannot exercise those rights. Now,
I'm not telling you that. I'm saying, Jim, I'm saying that I'm just proving the point that.
No. That was for sure. You're spot on. Who complained and who got listened to, the squeaky wheel. But in the perception or the potential for safety, you're giving up your constitutional rights. And I think shame on us for allowing that to happen. Now, what if you are a business owner in Traverse County? Traverse City has a huge, it's funded a lot by tourism. And if you own a small shop in Traverse City and you make your hay, you make your money in June, July, and August, because that's when the majority of the people are visiting Traverse City. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden, you see an influx of whatever the number is, 10, 15, 20,000 people in and around the area. And in April and May now, your little, whether it's a brewery, whether it's a little coffee shop, if you were allowed to have it open, if it was something that sold some sort of little trinkets, and now you start to see foot traffic, you're happy that people have came north. But also, let me just say that we've differentiated from that. I have a second property inside the state, and I'm not able to utilize my personal property, But if I have a second property in Florida or in Alabama, and I'm going to come home to my property, I'm allowed to do that. I just can't utilize my property in northern Michigan. It is not based on science. It's based on control. Back to you.
Well, I don't think that so the governor only has control over Michigan, right? Michigan legislation. They cannot dictate whether outside, they can't put a perimeter ban on the borders of the state unless it's imminent threat. And at that point, the cost structure to be able to patrol that would be insane. The infrastructure to patrol that would be insane. But what all I'll say is that the governor can't put limitations, and the state legislature can't put limitations on people coming into this state as far as from out of state. So all they can do is put bans on people within the state. So I understand the mindset of that. So as far as people coming in from out of the state, it's not even possible. But as far as people inside the state, they can try and enforce limitations. Now, I don't agree with it. I don't think it's okay. But I'm just trying to explain to you that, that process is insane. The Cherry Festival was recently canceled in Traverse City, one of the biggest revenue generators for the town, right? That's the biggest issue. And I'm sure for every person, these people that are, behind the scenes trying to pull strings to say, hey, don't let people come up north, because I'm sure Whitmer has a nice property up there in Traverse City, and so do a lot of legislators to, protect. And I just want to say this side note that drives me nuts. Not one of these people making these decisions that are impacting the citizens is being impacted by pay, is being impacted by life choices right now. Essential workers, yeah, they can travel wherever the hell they want to, but not one of them is being impacted. And then I'll get back to this, the up north thing. So anyway, they have their places up north. Somebody, behind the scenes said, don't let people come up north. Whitmer put it into the government, action. I guarantee you that every single business owner that's up north, ice cream shop, cheesecake place, restaurant, is calling and complaining as well. The Cherry Festival's closed. For every positive, or for every action, there's going to be an equal and positive reaction. I think what's happening now is there's going to be a flood of reactions to the mandates that are coming. Now, I do want to get back to some points here. I do. You had said that saving lives is not important. Listen. Saving lives is the Achilles. It's the Pandora's box for the U.S. government. We go back into history for why wars start, or why new mandates start, or why sanctions were put, on Europe prior to World War I and II. It doesn't matter. Saving lives is the Pandora's box. War on drugs. You want to talk about war on drugs? Well, really, was it a war on drugs, or was it a way for the U.S. government to feed more money into the federal system for policing, police force? I don't know. War on drugs. We go back to the Vietnam War. The list goes on and on and on. As far as saving lives is the reason, we get it. It's historically proven that saving lives is going to be a foundation for an open checkbook, changing legislation, doing whatever you want to do. The issue that I have with this is that over time, the rubber band gets tighter and tighter and tighter on our civil liberties. Now, with that said, I don't know how you reverse it, Jim.
Hold on. Let me. I want to jump in there, because what we're talking about here, in a number of ways, is a number of the amendments. But let's just talk about the 14th Amendment. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. That's section 1. I'll stop there, because I'll say that her basis for stating she had the authority was a 1946 legislation act, and it states within reason. That's her legal foundation. Unreasonable is an easily won argument by a non-scholared person such as myself in the the studies of law, any reasonable person could win an argument in court that these steps have been unreasonable. And we've talked about a few of them. I give back to you.
Well, I think you're right. The problem is that the U.S. government and the state legislation, state governments pass laws, and then it's up to the citizens to spend their money, hard-earned money, to fight it. That's all there is to it.
So you brought up the again, it could be an entire show just on the value of human life, and it is what it can be debated as when life starts, even, and when that value has worth. But
hey, Jim,
when it talks about
let's just role play this out. Let's say that I'm somebody that's making the laws, and you're a citizen. Hey, Jim, we're gonna pass these laws, and we're gonna limit your civil liberties for now because so and so, this huge impact of the population is going to die or at risk of dying, and you just need to hang in there with us.
And I would ask, maybe there's going to be a bunch of people die, because let's talk about what the science told us in this particular case. First of all, the models. Dr. Fauci told everybody that this is late February on mainstream media. At this time, the United States of American citizenry do not have anything to worry about this. The deaths from this are not going to be anything more than the average in the flu. Then in March, because I really truly believe they subscribe to never letting a crisis go to waste, so we can start applying legislation and governance in these cases, the models suggested, and this was with mitigating steps, the model suggested in March that 2 to 5 million people were going to pass away. Now, at this point, when these models started telling us that 2 to 5 million people in the United States are going to pass away, even with mitigating efforts, the president had already stopped travel from China, airline travel. He'd already stopped travel from Europe. And both of those were at, of course, no matter what this guy does, because of Trump drain syndrome, nothing is going to matter. But what we have is 2 to 5 million people dying. Then it was rescaled. Oh, we're going to have 600,000 people dying. Then the models came back with 250,000 people dying. Now the models most recently have come back to 100,000 people dying, and or maybe a little bit less through August. And then, like so many other viruses, you're going to have a fade out, and then it's going to come back again. My point is that when the government says, you being the lawmaker, you ask me, hey, James Detroit, we're just going to take away a few of your liberties temporarily so that we can save a bunch of lives. And I ask for the data, and the data continually changes the information, as well as you as the lawmaker tells me this is just to bend the curve, to flatten the curve. And now all of a sudden, most of academia and these quote unquote experts on mainstream media are telling us, Dr. Fauci, this needs to be a rolling reoccurring of the shutdowns so that we can save lives. Okay, when you do this, you are not saving lives. This is my stance. You are actually going to kill more people, because you're going to continue to catapult people back into that are suffering the mental health of our society, the mental health issues, the alcohol, and the opioids. More people are going to die in those categories, and that's the lack of empathy I see from our lawmakers. We really don't care about them. And we had 60 to 70,000 people dying from opioids, and President Trump was the first person to actually create a real task force to look at this and study it. And the First Lady has actually championed this. And when we had almost full employment, we actually were making great strides for our most vulnerable. And now it is completely reversed, and it is momentously going the wrong direction. Back to you, Chris.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So you're saying in February, the information was different from March, from January to February to March, it was always different. Now, of course, their biggest excuse is now is that, well, who was not giving proper information from China. China wasn't giving WHO proper information. Now they're saying that WHO is controlled by China and that we had incorrect information. So the information Fauci and Trump and the government was relaying out to us was information coming from WHO. Now, let's be real. Let's just be real for a minute here. There were many doctors in China that were going to social media that were trying to be limited on their communication and what they could say. And they were going to social media and they were going to posts. They were putting their information out there, right? But
Yep.
we were ignoring that information in the government. I remember Trump and Fauci sitting up there saying, hey, this is not going to be a big deal. Not a worry. We had people in California that were infected. We had people in Seattle infected at the time. Not a big deal. We're going to be fine. Right? So the misinformation here is an issue. I don't care what anybody says about Trump. Honestly, I'm not going to state my opinion on it. He defunded pandemic.
I'm gonna give you some pushback on that. Even Politico has debunked that. He did not defund the pandemic office. He actually had 3 offices inside the executive branch that were overlapped and nobody was efficient. So he combined all of them. No one actually lost their job. He actually restructured something that was inefficient though. And that has been accurately reported and debunked. Even Politico, which is not a conservative media. So go ahead.
So anyway, taking the funds away from that and taking the team management away from that, it diluted the system as far as pandemic research. The CDC has been, the budget's been cut. I don't know what the answers are. I'm not in the working operation to say, hey, you know what, this makes sense, or we're going to listen. Jim, you and I are in business. We can look at spreadsheets on work that we do, and you and I know that we can take money out of certain budget aspects and put it into other budget aspects, and it's going to work. It's not going to affect the flow and operation. I don't know what the flow and operation of the CDC is, and I don't know the flow of operation of the government is. But all I know is that, you know, Trump himself was sitting up there with Dr. Fauci January, February, saying it's not going to be a big deal. It's not going to impact us. Then, you know, it's a runaway effect from there, because it became a pandemic aspect. It hit them blindsided. It hit the U.S. government blindside. But here's the deal. I don't care about the past. I care about where we're going in the future. And what matters to me is that we continue to stand up with a voice. We do it responsibly, and we move forward. We are literally choking our system to death. It's not going to be able to come back online. Manufacturers will not be able to be at full steam for it. We're looking at a recession here that could be worse than 2008, 2009. I guarantee it. More people haven't paid their mortgages.
I'm in agreement with you, Chris. And on the economic impact of this is going to be worse than I do not believe Larry Kudlow has the accuracy of a V recovery. But the difference between the stock market, Wall Street and Main Street, I think have never been greater. But on 2 points that you made, my point on the individual James Detroit podcast today is going to be, was the data really any different? That's my great question. I think that Trump's instincts were right, spot on, when he was the only person in the room saying we had to stop travel from China. I think he was spot on when he said we had to stop travel from Europe. At that time, the data was still saying it was not going to be any worse than the flu. But, oh, wait a minute. Somebody, and some people think deep state's not in existence, but somebody in the bureaucracy behind the curtain said, look at what we can get done. We can start. The modern monetary theory people, you want to be happy? You're going to get to be happy. We're all socialists now. We're printing money and just passing it out. The Fed is buying not only good debt, corporate debt, but junk bonds as well. This is setting up for the greatest disaster of all time. Now, unless Donald Trump is either become consumed by the swamp or he is playing a game that nobody can see the end to, which is just going to destroy an entire system and rebuild it, which I'm hoping we can get back to the beginning. But you mentioned the CDC. Yeah, the CDC has had their funds cut because Donald Trump, and I'm going to give him credit for this because I give him a lot of criticism as well at times, he looked at this and said, what's the CDC really spending money on? And if you look at some of the spent over the last 5 years on enormous studies, you and I would think it's a great study to figure out whether or not Native American population in Minnesota, if they were to get back to their original food source of, 500 years ago, would they be healthier? And $50 million was spent on that study. If you and I got some of that money, we'd be happy that the CDC was giving us money to be able to prove something that was an obvious common sense. For sure, they'd be healthier. You want to know why they'd be healthier? Because they wouldn't be eating all this crap that's in our food chain right now that's put into it. And the FDA and the CDC saying, oh, it's still healthy. Parts per million, that poison that you're getting, it's not going to kill you immediately. And then we go to the other aspect that I think is another topic for another day, the difference between living and being alive. We have slowly but surely, as the United States of America citizenry, bought into the fact that medicine can keep us alive. Mm-hmm. There's a difference between being alive and living. It's one thing for medicine to be able to save a guy from a heart attack who still has 25 years of living left. But it's another thing to keep people alive. And so many of us have a document that is a power of attorney for health purposes that say, I do not want to be resuscitated. Well, being resuscitated because you had a heart attack and you had blockage and you can go on and live a productive life for another 25 years is one thing. To be kept alive on machines or through 10, 15, 20 different medications that all have side effects that are going to kill you anyway. Here's another thing. I've got a friend. He's an awesome guy. He's in his early 70s. He's diagnosed with cancer. They put him on radiation. He looks like crap. He feels terrible. Yes, he is dying. We all die at some point. Mm-hmm. But it's about the quality of life we're going to be able to enjoy. And there's a difference between really living and just being alive. And I think that we have compromises in that.
I want to interject with that because
yep.
The reality is if I have to be saved from a heart attack for my medication too, I mean this is a ball of wax here.
Oh yeah,
I understand exactly what you're saying. I agree with you, and I think 99% of people in the population in the United States would agree with you as well. The problem that we're facing though is that if I have to get saved for a heart attack or get saved for the flu, and I have no house to live in because I just gave it to the hospital to pay for those medical bills, is it worth living?
Well, I'm going to say this. Let's try to stick, because we only got a few minutes left. Let's try to stick to the concept of living versus just being alive. And I think that a life well lived, regardless of its years, right, on a scale from time, a life well lived is worthy of celebration, especially, I mentioned this earlier in the week. My grant taught me more about living than any other person I've ever had contact with. His death taught me more about the blessing that his death was. He did not rot away in a nursing home. He was able, right up until the day he went into that hospital and we unplugged the machines 4 days later. He was able to do anything he wanted to, as far as work around the house, mow his own lawn, work on cars, and he was in retirement. But that is such a wonderful way to go. And God is going to decide how we pass away. But I think we've played God in our medical system in a lot of ways so that you can keep people alive longer so you can suck more money out of them. Yeah. That's what I really think. And people would call me out and say that I'm wrong on that people are trying to prolong life. Well, there's a difference between being alive and really living. Back to you, Chris.
Well, I think that going with that, the medical industry has always had that constant dilemma. when you're saving a life. Well, here you go. It's back to the whole saving lives thing, right? We're saving lives. We can do whatever we want to do. It's the dilemma of when you have profits on one side and you have morals on the other. It's the medical ethics. And
I agree with you, Chris.
When you're in acute care, when you're in issues of radiation therapy because, you have cancer, right? So do you decide to try and get another 5-10 years out of your life? Or is it corruption in the system?
Well, I agree with you because
we're talking about the monopoly of hospitals. We're talking about different things. Listen, Jim, at the end of the day, we, the people, have a choice to continue this conversation every single day. The citizens of the United States today, the people that are most vocal, the squeaky wheels get the attention. But the reality is that our generations are so fundamentally set on Instagram, on our profile posts, on our images of smiles in happy lives, right? It can't be that way if we want real change. We have to be able to unite in a way that where the politicians actually see, hear, and feel our voice. And if we can't do that, we're speechless.
Well, and let me just comment on that, where money and ethics become clouded with our health system. If the FDA was really a government agency for protecting life, then we wouldn't have all of these drugs that have been gone through all the clinical studies, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and then have the outcomes that they have if they really cared. And at this point right now, my greatest concern from a medical aspect is that we're going to fast track a vaccine for a virus that doesn't appear to be any more dangerous than the flu. On the whole scale, it's more contagious, but it's not any more deadly in the law of large numbers. And especially when we boost our immune systems, we get more sleep, we boost our immune systems, we take out the junk from our food chain, we put in better supplements, and the science, the real numbers, give us the power to understand that our human immune system is the most important aspect to this, not the drugs that the system, big pharma, can create and our politicians can push on us and even mandate, even make it illegal for you not to get a vaccine. That's what's coming here. And I used to think the non-vaccine people were crazy. And now I've looked at them in a different way because I think they are really onto something here. Far too many people are dying. The polio is having this resurgence. It's the vaccinated strain that's causing the resurgence of polio globally. And we can thank, and we can point to the Gates Foundation. We can point to the people that are in the power of most influence. And money does gain them even more influence. I hope that the things that we see happening right now, you and I, all of the citizens, through the social media context, we do not get kicked off, that we get a chance to continue the conversation. This intellectual dark web that I'm just learning about, I'm so happy to see that there are actually people out there, both sides of the political aisle, both conservatives and progressives, and Democrats and Republicans, and you get a chance to have real conversation. I thank you so much for engaging with me, because we're not going to see everything 100% the same. And I look forward to the next time we get a chance to take up this topic. It's going to be a continuation of the topic of the people, by the people, for the people. A revolution needs to occur, and it needs to be peaceful. And this is how we can do it. Right here. We can do it through the media access that we have, social media access that we have. Let's try to be a positive change, back to the beginning.
I agree with you. Thanks for having me on. It was fun.
Awesome. Till next time. Thanks, Chris.
See ya.